Well, hey everyone, welcome back, and thanks for joining me live or in the recording for the React TDD live stream. I'm Josh Justice, aka Coding It Wrong. That's who I am on GitHub and on Twitter, and as I always say, you can follow this stream and let me know afterwards if you think I am coding it wrong. Probably a lot of you React developers, as I'm recording this right now, are watching the React Conf live stream. Just yesterday, they announced hooks, which are very exciting, a new way to use not pure function components, but function components instead of using classes to get stateful behavior and other things. So that's really interesting. I'm interested to see how that all plays out. It actually reminds me of the fact that in our tests, we're trying to decouple from the implementation. So our end-to-end tests are just testing the user interaction with our web app. And so that works just fine whether you're using the new React approach or not. And also our component tests are just testing when a component is rendered, when interactions happen, what is the result. And so all of these tests should work fine when refactoring to use hooks. So maybe in the future we'll give that a try and see how that runs. But I'm not ready for that today. So today what we're going to do is take our app that we have done our first TDD feature in, and what we're going to do is to refactor it. Specifically, we're going to refactor it to make it look less ugly. So let me show you how ugly it looks. This is the repo, the React TDD live stream repo, and you should see a link for it in the Twitch or YouTube comments down below. And here's what it looks like right now. Not very beautiful. So we can add a restaurant, we can type something into it, and it shows up in the list. And then again, we're good to go. Rizwan, hey, how's it going? Thanks for saying hello. In here, so this is our app. It's incredibly ugly, and this is because we've stuck very close to the TDD approach of just getting the features working, writing the bare minimum code necessary to pass the test. To show you the test real quick here, back in our app, we have an end-to-end test here using Cypress to test adding a restaurant to make sure that it displays the restaurant in the list. We also have a component test here for the new restaurant form component, the test that clicking the save button calls the onSave event handler. Cool, so that's great. So this is our component, this is our functionality. And so now what we want to do is we want to refactor it. We want to use these tests to take this terrible minimal user interface and make it look a bit better. Now I can't design worth anything, and so instead of designing it ourselves, we're going to use a UI library. We're going to use React-Materialize because this is a library that some friends of mine have used, and it worked out pretty well, although it actually ran into a bit of a trouble with testing. They got through it, but this will be great because it'll give us a chance to see just what testing is like and how to get through some of those challenges. We just adjust the screen here so you can see it just fine on the stream, and there it looks a lot better. So React-Materialize is a UI component library that follows Google's material design guidelines, and it uses the Materialize CSS library under it. But you can see here, if I zoom in a little bit at least, a button component, a modal component, and so we've got kind of UI components that we're going to be able to use to get this functionality. And so we're going to refactor under test to switch these out. So today's going to be a bit more experimental. I haven't actually used React-Materialize before other than helping those friends with it a little bit. So we're going to see how it works. So what I've done so far, let me switch over to this other tab so you can see. So I added the, actually I went ahead and moved these out. So let me just show you. I'll just show you this way. So what we've done so far, in package.json, I've added in React-Materialize. And let's take a look at their instructions. So I did that, again, just like a cooking show, I'll add the dependencies in so that the yarn or npm install doesn't take too long. So in their instructions, they say add React-Materialize, you can import stuff from it, and then it says, this is kind of interesting, this is actually a little surprising to me, that we import the Google icon font and Materialize CSS and jQuery. That's really interesting. But I guess that's because probably the Materialize library itself is a general CSS library that uses jQuery, and apparently that doesn't conflict with the way React works. So jQuery and Materialize.js will handle some visual effects, and React handles React and all the React type things. So let's go ahead and drop these in. We are using Parcel for our build process, and so we actually set up our own index.html file. I forget if Create React App has your own index.html file, but I know for sure that there's a way to modify it when you need to. So we're just going to paste in these entries here, these CSS entries. We could look at having these local at some point in the future, but for now, hitting this external server here is just fine. And then we'll import jQuery and Materialize here. We'll put them in, and we'll see. I think actually, just honestly, for the first time, I noticed some of the interesting visual effects on clicking the buttons. I don't know if you'll be able to see that remotely, but it looks kind of nice. And that modal is actually going to be useful. We're going to get to try that out, so that's cool. All right, so with this, we've got everything added in. So let me just make these extra additions to our CSS. I'll switch back over and make sure everything runs just fine. So in this bottom panel here, I have our unit test, our component tests. I hit return. It's going to run. It's going to just spin up a little bit because JavaScript's a little slow on my machine sometimes, but that runs. And let's open up Cypress as well. Have I lost Cypress? I've lost Cypress. Yeah. So we'll get Cypress starting up while we're thinking about this here. And with this, let's start refactoring, and we'll just kind of do one thing visually at a time. So here's our app. We view the page. The first most obvious thing is that button could use some styling, so let's do that. Let's style that button. We don't need to keep the test files up probably. So this is probably in the restaurant list page component. We're currently using a plain just button HTML tag, and so we're going to change this to be a React-Materialize button instead. Button, and then there's a waves parameter there, so we're going to see how that works. But so let's just go ahead and something has happened wrong here. I can't open Cypress. Oh yeah. I think I typed in the wrong command name. Let's see here. I called it E2E. I'm actually not totally consistent about this across my project, so we'll get that started again. All right, so what we'll do here, we'll just try importing a button and see how that works. Import a button from React-Materialize. Oh, there's Cypress. So let's run it. Let's give Cypress a run just to see. Cool, and the app unchanged. Actually, it's already showing a little bit of the visual styles from Materialize, but we're going to want a lot more, of course. But the test still passes. And if we reload the page, we can see actually this visual styling for the input is different. But so let's go get a real button in place now. We'll replace this, and let's just see if the same API works. Let's see if data test and if on-click work on here. So we'll save this. We'll reload the page here. And we can see that we have a nice material design looking button, so that's nice. And it looks like actually the component test passes, so that's great. So that probably means that the data test element is able to work and it's able to be changed, or rather the data test on the button is able to work to be able to click it, so that's good. Well, maybe we won't run Cypress every time, but it is very quick, so let's do that if we can think of it. Cool. So this is now running. This is running fine. Thinking about this test here, I think I might already go ahead and change the save button as well. Remember here, I don't know if you noticed this last time if I called it out, but as you move the cursor over steps on the left-hand side in Cypress, it actually updates your DOM to go through the process to the different steps you were in, to these DOM snapshots. So I can see the save button here, even though it's not there at the end. So let's update that save button while we're thinking about it as well. So restaurant list page, that's the new restaurant form. So let's just do this. We'll import the button from React-Materialize. And that's really nice that it has the same interface as a regular button. That's nice for a library to do that as much as possible. Cool. Oh, but our component test failed. Right, the add restaurant button is not in the form. That's separate. So our Cypress end-to-end test was able to work. So it was able to find the save button and click on it, but our component test was not. So let's see what's up there, and we'll hide this yarn start a little bit. Method simulate is only meant to be run on a single node, but two were found instead. So that's interesting. So I'm not actually sure the best way to troubleshoot the fact that data test save new restaurant button, two things were happening. But I think what I tried on that other project was this. I think what I did is sort of assuming, actually, you know what? We're on the web now. I'm thinking still in React Native land, but on the web, we can actually investigate this. So let's load up the page. Let's add the restaurant. Let's inspect the save button and see what DOM elements are rendered out. So actually, it ends up just rendering out a button, save new restaurant button. So that's really interesting. I wonder why that's erroring out. Data test save new restaurant button, and I don't see two save new restaurant buttons. Maybe it's possible that it sees the wrapping button component with the data test attribute, as well as the inner button here that it's passed to. Let's try checking the React tools. Yeah, okay. I'm not sure, but I think that's what's going on here. Let me see how the font size is for this. No, that's not increasing. So down here, if you can see it in the very small font size, there's the button component with the button HTML tag inside it. And so I think what we're going to do is actually we can say in the test, we're looking for an actual HTML button with an attribute of data test new restaurant name. Oh, nope, sorry, this is the button. And I think that'll probably work. Let's give it a try and see. I'm glad to be walking you all through this. This is experimentation we do as we go. Cool, so that passed. That succeeded, so that's very exciting. Okay, cool, so that button change worked. We had the other button change as well. So while we're at it, just kind of replacing the normal components, this text field is already getting the appropriate styling, but let's see what happens for the component in here. Forms, we're just gonna look it up. It's a fun animation. Forms. Input fields. I actually do, so yeah, check this out. This is a really cool thing. So I'm an iOS user, so I don't, that's not what I want. Something that's interesting about my clicking that's going on here. Well, at least with first and last name here, as I click on them, like the place of the text is moving around, like that's really neat. So we want to get that. I'm an iOS user, so I don't use things with material design as often, so this is kind of cool to try this out. Sort of Android style. And I guess web style, I guess Google does that as well. I don't know. I'm not into design, so these things are all new to me. So yeah, let's use this input component. One other thing I really like about this is that I don't have to have a separate label. Again, when I'm doing simple CRUD stuff, I just want to be able to say, here's a form input and just be done and good to go. So this is really nice. So we have input, placeholder, S is for grid layout. We'll get back to that in a little bit. And then label is that. So let's try that. So in our new restaurant form, instead of this input, we're going to import button and input from React-Materialize. We'll change this to an input. Oh yeah, and I actually noticed we didn't actually have a label for the restaurant name before. The test didn't drive us to that. But now we're getting one for free, which is great. So placeholder and label. It looks like if we just have label, that'll be good. Yeah, we'll get this little animation. So let's call it, and type text looks like it's not needed. Let me see if there's other kinds of, okay, so there's other types, but text is the default type. So yeah, let's take that out then. And we'll do label equals restaurant name. I would assume there's default value. I would assume value most likely works just because that's so core to using forms in React on the web. I would assume onChange and data test work as well. So we'll try this. I assume the test is going to break for the same reasons about the data test attribute, so let's find out. Before we even go back to the test to fix it, it is the same error. Let's just look in the UI to see if it's working. Add restaurant. Ooh, nice little animation going on. So that's good. So let's see if our simple fix to the test will fix it. Input, run it, and it's good to go. As a reminder, the reason we're using these data test attributes is that it's a nice way to look up elements without coupling to either like ID fields in case you're using those for any JavaScript, or CSS classes, which you might be using for styling. So now, even though we've totally changed the way our component works, we're able just to use this data test attribute, and that should only need to change in case of test purposes. Now we see here that the way that works kind of changes when we're using a UI form library. So it's not a bad idea to start out your app using a component library instead of refactoring to it later. But if you do change it around, we're kind of showing through what the tests are robust to and what they require changes to. So that test passes. Let's just rerun Cypress 2. And it succeeds. That's great. So next, looking at Sushi Place showing up in the list here, that could use some nice look and feel. And I think when I was briefly browsing through React-Materialize before, looks like collections is the name of what we want. It's like a nice little list. I think Bootstrap CSS framework calls it a list. So we have a collection with multiple collection items in it. Are they links? Well, they're not links yet, so let's not go back to that. We'll just have a collection with collection items. That'll be nice. So this will be in the restaurant list. We will import. And I'm going to go ahead to multi-line here. Collection item. I do like trailing commas. By the way, a special hello to anybody who's watching the stream or watching the recording from Connect Tech Conference last week. It was great to come and talk about TDD in React and in Vue.js. So I hope you follow along for this series, and it's helpful to kind of take what we learned even deeper. And feel free to check out the YouTube channel to see my past recordings and kind of keep tabs on things. All right, we're going to pull in collection item, and so that's going to be just what we replace here. Whoa, was that some Visual Studio Code magic? So I double click the opening tag, paste it in collection, and it automatically updated the closing tag. Visual Studio Code magic is great until it breaks, which is not too often, honestly, compared to some IDEs. Oh, and collection items we want here. That's wrapping now, so I think I'm going to put that on another line to keep things looking nice and clean. So yeah, so let's before we automated test. Okay, well we got a failing something here. Expected corresponding JSX closing tag for collection. Ah, what have I messed up? Interesting. I think Visual Studio Code actually messed up. So let's see here. We got collection item. We're going to paste it for this LI. Oh no, it didn't. It was something about my undoing and redoing that caused a problem. So we're good. All right. So let's just see that the app builds, and it builds. So then before that, oh, it looks like the tests are still passing. So that's nice. But let's actually it's interesting. One of the other nice things about Cypress letting you watch as it runs the test is you can click through and kind of see at a glance the whole app, even if what you're testing is on a different page. So now we have Sushi Place on the next page, and it's showing up okay. Cool, so that looks great. So I think I'm going to do a commit here to kind of save these changes, and then we'll kind of go through and do some more cleanup. So I'm going to type GAP here. And by the way, if this is something you haven't done in command line for Git, it can be really useful. You can do git add -p, which I think means patch. And this will allow you to review the changes one at a time interactively to decide if you want to include them. So this is a great way to review what we've done to make sure we understand it and that it's all intentional changes. So here, we're importing React-Materialize components. That makes sense. And now we're changing input and button to the imported components. Yes. Now we're using collection and collection item. That's great. Importing button, using button, updating our tests to specify input and button elements, and we're good to go. So we'll call this update form and UI and simple UI elements. So that's what we've done. We'll switch back over to the tab that has the tests running. So now let's talk about layout. So this is like full width on the screen, and it's actually when I zoom back out to full zoomed out, that looks pretty big. So let's do some layout. So we have, where is this? This is up at CSS Grid. So standard 12-column fluid responsive grid system. And so honestly, I'm not the biggest designer in the world, so I've used grid systems like this in a very basic way. But if you haven't touched them at all, you might learn something real quick. So we can have a row, and then we specify columns. And in the columns, we say, what is the number of columns to use for small screens? And then what are the number of columns to use for medium screens and stuff like that. So this, I'm pretty sure, is not going to break anything because this is just layout related, but that's great. That's wonderful. Again, like one of the things that I love because I don't have a good mind for visual design is that test-driven development allows me to really focus on the features and getting them working, and then I can shift my mind to thinking in a user interface format, thinking very experimentally like we're doing right now, and I can make changes with confidence that I haven't broken any of the functionality of the app. It's really great to be able to do those things at separate times. All right, so we have row and a column, so let's look into here. This is on the page itself, the restaurant list page. So let's go ahead and break this into separate lines. Column and row. It was COL, right? Row and COL, yeah. All right. So this is our overall page. In a real app, once I started putting navigation in, I might move this elsewhere. In fact, you know what? I am going to go ahead and do that. So let's just undo the changes I just did. I'm going to go out at the app level. Let me think. Let's get it working at the app level here, and then we'll maybe move it somewhere else. So we'll try that real quick. We can be experimental about that. So we're going to add a column and a row. One of the reasons to put it out here is whichever page we're on, whichever navigation library we add or anything like that, we probably want the page to be the same. Really, mainly what I'm focusing on now is to get the content to kind of be centered with like margins on the left and right-hand side and get it to a reasonable width, even as we kind of resize the window. And we're going to be able to use Firefox here, which is the same thing in Chrome, to go into responsive design mode to see how it looks on a small screen. So out at the application level, I want to put these in. So we're just going to put the whole application in a column. And let's see how I do spacers. I wonder if I do, maybe I just do a spacer column. Let's see here. Small offset, here we go. Add S2 to, offset, simply add S2 to the class, where S signifies the screen class prefix. Huh. Sounds confusing. We'll play with that to see. Let's get the width working first. So, no, we want a row first. And then there's going to be the column that's containing the contents. And so in that column, we're going to say that let's just write it all out. On a small screen, we want to take it to take up the full 12 width. And let's try on a medium screen, 10. I've built a number of small kind of utility apps like this, and kind of gradually decreasing the width as you get a little bit larger can end up looking nice. So on small screen, it's size 12, medium it's 10, large it's 8. And so that's going to not have any indenting, outdenting, but let's just give that a try here. So you can see from the side here that it's actually being limited. If it's hard to see that line, then I can come in here and add a restaurant name. That does not look like that's where we want that to be, but let's see. So the width of is here. I wish I had a background color on that because that's probably a little hard for you to see. Well, that's the best I can do right now. So let's resize the window. As it gets smaller, notice that it jumped out to be a little wider, and then on small it jumps out again. So small, it takes up the full width, medium, a little bit less, and then on large it's a little bit less still. It kind of continues to be a little bit less. So that's all good. Okay, cool. So, but now we want to offset it. So let's see here. There's an offset property. Add S2 to the class. Number after. Let's look up React-Materialize offset example. Let's look up an example of this. Offset equals M2L3. Well, this is an issue with it not working, so let me look at the answers to make sure that's correct. Yep, offset M2L3. Yes, let's give that a try. So what we want is the offset, and am I doing that right with the curlies around it? Yeah, all right. So at a size small, we don't want any offset because it's the full 12 width. But at a medium, the width is 10 out of 12, so we want an offset of 1. And then at a large size, we want an offset of 2 because there's 2 on each side and 8 total. So let's give that a try and see how it looks. So here we go. It's centered now, and it stays centered as we make it go down further, and then at the small size, it's full width. So that's perfect. I feel like I saw something weird when we were on the other screen, so let's try that now. We add a restaurant, so restaurant name's just going down there, so that's very strange. I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe we want to be using rows to lay this stuff out, so let's see if that's the case. We got rows and columns. Now we're on restaurant list page. So now we're within the page itself, and we can do some layout within here if we want. We do have a button and then the form and then the restaurant list, and we're not specifying how those lay out. And so, yeah, let's make that a bit explicit with the layout controls from React-Materialize. So let's add column and row here. So let's say, we'll do a row here for the button. Let's do a row for the form, although I think we're going to replace that with a modal, but that's okay for now. And then we'll do a row with the restaurant list. And we'll talk about columns now. So this should at least break the line, fix the line breaking issue. It does not. So that's interesting. So let's actually size them the way, well, no, before we size them, yeah, let's size them. Let's do it. Let's experiment to see. I'm kind of curious here. This is not the kind of layout that I would expect. Row. Okay, so we got one row here that has add restaurant. Another row. Oh, okay. What's happening here is this is the row for the form, but within the form, the input and the button are showing up on the same line. Okay, So that's interesting. Maybe that was happening before, I'm not sure. Some artifact of putting these things together. So now we can lay those out. So let's do that next. Actually, we may not even need these rows anymore. Let's undo all this and see, now that we've figured out what's going on. No, we do. Yeah, so you notice. So now, without those rows, this collection is just getting kind of slammed in here. And something to do with the way these things are being laid out. It just kind of gets munged all together. So that's not good. So we do want these rows in here. That's at least one way to do it. And that's kind of using the constructs that Materialize gives us. Okay, and so now let's lay out these form elements. I think we can put them left and right like this, at least on this screen size. Like, I think that would be good. We don't need to make this too fancy, but just enough to kind of show the options that we have. So I think the grid was saying, I think I was seeing that on form elements you could use that as well. So yeah, there is an example here of using S6, S12, and let's see if there's a little documentation on here to describe it. You know, it doesn't have a whole lot of explanation, but that is showing kind of the size, how to lay these things out within the grid. So let's think about that. So say we just have a div here. I don't know if it'll break or not, but I think it would be more correct or more descriptive of the fact that if we're using a row. Let's look at their example though to see if they aren't following that. Yeah, they're showing a row with inputs in it, so that seems more correct. So let's add the row in, but we don't necessarily need columns. In fact, we'll just wrap the whole thing in a row. I think that'll be good. Okay, so we have an input and a button. I'm going to do the layout attribute first. We could always change that. Let's say at this screen size that this is 10. No, not small. So let's think from small first. It's good to think small first. So on small, let's say it's actually 12, and let's say the button is 12 as well, so it wraps to the next line. And then what we can do is on medium, maybe this is 8. To make sure there's enough space for 4 on this size, and then maybe on large, this is 10, and then here we only need 2. So let's see how that works. So we've got the form, although the layout of it, like I'm not sure if this is typical material design, but it's reasonable. We have the field and the save button next to it, and then as we scale down, so this gets more area, but the save button isn't actually filling up that whole area. So that's interesting. So let's see here. Maybe this was this element. Ideally, only columns are children of rows. Interesting. Is this the creator? Interesting. PRs are welcome. Da, 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 da. All right, so who knows what's happening there? Not quite sure, but this is good enough for now. And when we get small, let's see what happens. So when we get small enough, we have the restaurant name being full width and the save button wraps to the next line. So that's good. That's good enough for me. Let's try that. Cool, those are showing up there. Now we've done some non-trivial amount of layouts, so let's make sure that everything's still running just fine. We'll rerun our just test here for the component, and those pass, and we'll rerun our Cypress test here, and that already looks a lot nicer, so that's great. So let's commit that. The sizing and use of the row looks fine. We'll lay it out in the grid. Cool, so let's think through this now. What would we like to do next? Well, this is the next obvious thing. Like when there's no restaurants added, like this space here, the fact that it's just a line is not great. So let's see what collections allows us to do here. Something that would be like a nice placeholder. Ooh, well, here's one thing that's nice. This actually just distracted me. We could have a nice header that's grouped in. And we don't even have a header right now, actually. So let's see how that looks. Like we just see how that looks and see if we like it. Restaurant list, collection, header. Reload, restaurant shows up. Now we can type in, and that's nice. But this is still not my favorite because this is actually even a little bit more confusing when you haven't added a restaurant yet. You can't see that there's an empty list there. So I'll probably just add an element. let's add an element first, and then we'll kind of see if we can make it look good. So in this collection, we're mapping through the restaurant names and adding a collection item for each. So let's also add here if, actually we want to use ternary. Restaurant names if length is 0. I think I can see, yeah, actually we could maybe even use ampersand so that if this is true, then we render this out. We're going to say collection item none added yet. So now restaurants none added yet, and then when we add a restaurant, oh, something errored out. Child is null, can't access its props property. Interesting. I wonder if this is because, I wonder why that is. Because there's not a key on here. Let me try the key on here. No, that's going to be this. I'm not sure. Child is null, can't access its props property. Oh, so it's the fact that I'm returning null. So something about this, maybe it's the collection, doesn't like me returning null, as unlike in other contexts. Interesting. So let's think through here. Maybe y'all, I work in Vue.js day to day, so maybe it's obvious to y'all who work in React more how you might do this. We could add the none added yet to their list of restaurant names, but that kind of makes it function a little bit differently. This isn't going to be the cleanest in the world, but I think what I'm going to do is do this. We'll say if restaurant length is equal to 0, then we'll just have two separate collections here. Let's do this. I haven't come yet. Again, because of not working in React day to day, I haven't come to my favorite opinions around formatting. Things like this. And I'd honestly like to do a little refactoring of the way our views are set up here to break these things out. So we can maybe do that a little later. Maybe a little later today even. So then, otherwise, we'll do this and we'll loop through it. So there's a little duplication here in our code, but that's one of the nice things of a test coverage is that we can set these things up and then refactor them later. Okay, so expect an indication of 6 spaces. So this is more what it prefers. Oh, that's fine. That's good enough. Okay, so if length is 0, return this. Otherwise, return this. That's good, and that's not too much duplication right now. Child props is undefined. Can't access its href property. Interesting. Are we returning? We should be returning. Let's see if we... I'm just going to put something else in here to see if that fixes it. Right. All right. Oh, maybe I wasn't using a collection item. Let's see. Yep, that's probably it. Maybe that would have even fixed the thing at the start. So let's add a new collection item. This is none added yet. See if that works. Let's just have Cypress run the test to make sure things are good. None added yet, and then Sushi Place is there. And so, okay, so now that this is working, let's actually try that refactor again. Let's try to change it back to... I'm going to save this. Yeah, let's try it. I'm going to save this so I can get back to it if we need to. So let's try always returning this collection stuff. And actually, we can just do this. This will just kind of stay inside of it. I think this is not quite how I've had it formatted before, but I think this is actually a better way to format it. You'd think that these squigglies would bug me, but I do actually really want this to be formatted nicely as we go. All right, so we always have the collection, but then inside, depending on the restaurant name's length, we're going to have one or the other of these. And actually, one or the other kind of expresses things a bit nicer. So let's run through it, and that actually still works. Okay, great. So I have none added yet. So the last thing is I want to make it clearer and more obvious in the UI that we haven't just added a restaurant named none added yet. There's a lot of hipster restaurant names these days, so maybe that's what's going on. Let's see if there's any kind of text formatting built into this. Doesn't look like it. Getting started. Looks like I might need to actually style it myself. All right, well, let's do it. Maybe let's see if I can add just a style attribute to the collection item. Color gray. We can make this much more fancy in the future, but this might work for now. Yeah, and it's gray, so that's great. Over here in the test, and it's good. So notice, one other thing to notice that we're not putting in tests to drive out all these look and feel aspects, because I don't feel the need to do that. I feel like this is just fine, that our tests are covering the behavior of the application, either at the end user level here or at the component level here. And what it looks like, and even what component libraries we're using, I'm considering an implementation detail here. And so I think this works out really well. All right, so I forget, let's make this a separate commit. Add in no restaurant case. All right, so I think we're to our big refactor now. So when I click add restaurant, this text here drops down. And I think that's nice, but it would be fun to actually play with the idea of using a modal instead, because I think that would work well and it would kind of make sense. And it would give me some guidance, at least, for how this kind of form should show up in the midst of here. Maybe we wouldn't really do that in a real mobile application, but I think that works great for here. So let's check that out. It's under JavaScript, as opposed to the rest of this that is not JavaScript. It's the modals. So we have a basic modal here. We can click on it and it'll pop up. So I haven't used this before, so let's just try this kind of starting from the basic. So we put in the modal, and then we put in the trigger, and that's what's actually going to be outputted in line. So that's a cool setup. That makes sense from a component-based standpoint. We don't need this temporary thing anymore. And so this is interesting. So think about this. Our end-to-end test here is making sure that the new restaurant name field doesn't exist. Then we press the button, and then we type into the field. And then later we make sure it still doesn't exist again. And so we're actually going through here, and even these steps will work just fine the same, whether we were navigating to new routes or whether we are using a modal or whatever. So this, again, our tests, because they're not very tightly coupled to our application, are going to allow us to make these changes. So that's really exciting. So our new restaurant form is our new restaurant form. So let's think about this. We're on our restaurant list page, and right now what we have is just a button and then a row here that says we should show the new restaurant form in that case. So I think really the way we have it set up now, these two things here are going to be replaced by the modal, because the modal we pass the trigger into it. So let's give that a try and see how that works. I'm going to import the modal up here. We'll leave these here for now. Modal. And so the content of the modal goes there. So we're just going to put the new restaurant form. That's the content of the modal. So that's actually really nice, the fact that we can just nest our component in there. The new restaurant form doesn't need to know that it's deployed in a modal or whatever. That works out really nice. And then for the modal, the header we can say, do I use single quotes or double quotes? I guess I use double quotes. New restaurant, just a style thing. And the trigger, so what do we show right here, would be our actual button. So we can just put our button in here. And I think this formatting would be good. Maybe we would refactor this out later, because it's starting to look a bit complex. Now we'll remove this. And I think we can actually probably get rid of our show new restaurant form state there. In fact, we can probably get rid of that on click as well. So is that really the case? So that's interesting. So we can pass in a button component, and we don't actually need to detect the event that comes on it. It looks like React-Materialize is going to do that for us. So that's pretty cool. So let's remove this on click, and let's remove this state. We can always add it back in later if we want. That's kind of nice that the modal component handles that for us. That's really nice, actually. Let's switch back to our other tab. Let's save it, and let's see. Again, I just kind of want to manually test in the browser here. So we have our add restaurant button still showing up. We click on it, new restaurant comes up. That's pretty sweet. And then we have a close down there. So that is less good. Having the save button there and the close button there is not ideal. I'm pretty sure that doesn't match material design or anybody's guidelines. But we'll experiment with that in a minute. Like, let's see if it actually works. And to do that, let's run Cypress. Interesting. We expected input not to exist in the DOM, but it was continuously found. So this might mean that that modal is actually rendered, it's just not visible. So let's see how that works. So this would be another aspect of some of the implementation of how things work in these components kind of showing up a bit. So there is some work involved in refactoring from one component visual implementation to another. So maybe there might be another thing. We say not exist, but it might not be visible might be better. But let's inspect for just a second here. Let's not show my personal email. We don't need to do that. Let's reload the page. And let's just get our inspector going up in here. I do not see the modal. So let's just inspect the modal and see where it is. It's down there. They snuck it down at the bottom, just like I used to do when I was manually writing modals with jQuery. So let's reload the page and see if it's there. That's a hidden div. Oh, we couldn't find it, but Cypress could find it. So I think not exist is not what we're looking for here. And so this is interesting. When we were doing testing on React Native and using the detox library, its detection of whether stuff existed or not used visibility. And that makes sense. That's actually makes sense. Like, the end user doesn't care whether it exists in the rendering tree or not. They care whether it's visible. So let's check out Cypress's docs to see what we can find about how to do this. And Cypress has really great docs, so this should be pretty easy. Write test, run test, debug test. Let's write test. Interacting with elements. Let's actually just search for exist. Conditional testing. Element existence. Let's see here. Visible. Here we go. Should be visible. Okay, cool. So that looks like that's going to be helpful. Should not be visible. And then we're going to enter stuff into it and check again that it should not be visible. So let's rerun that Cypress test and see. Cool. Okay, so this actually makes sense. So the test got to the point where we clicked on the Add Restaurant button and the modal showed up. And actually you can see in the background that Sushi Place Restaurant is being added, but the modal is not being dismissed. And that makes sense because we were updating that state variable to dismiss it before, but we're not doing that anymore. So let's check the docs for, I'm sure that there's a way to do that with Materialize. Let's find out how. I'm not 100% sure, so let's find out. Modal options, trigger actions. ID to trigger the modal opening closing. All right, so this is not obvious from here. So let's say React-Materialize to programmatically close modal. Okay, you can customize the behavior of Materialize modal using options, which can be found here at the bottom of the page. Okay, well, I don't want to use jQuery, that's for sure. So let's see if we can avoid that. Modal options object with options for modal. Okay, well, why don't you tell me what a modal options is? We might need to dig into the GitHub for it. So let's see here. Pull it up on GitHub. Search for modal options in this repository. Dismissible. Huh. I wonder if... It seems like this might be an artifact of Materialize CSS. Like back in the root library, something comes in. Oh yeah, and even the grouping into components, JavaScript, and forms comes into that. So let's check it out. Modals here with options. Cool. Yeah, this makes sense. All right, so some visual stuff we could play with. Dismissible. Starting top. Methods call on the plugin instance. Instance.close. So that's interesting. This is very interesting. So in an imperative framework, like using this directly in JavaScript, we'd be able to close it, but we can't do that here. So interesting. Change dismissible to false. Close modal. React-Materialize. Yeah, this is interesting. We may actually kind of end up materialize modal example. Here we go. And if we can't get this working, then I'll just do this offline and we'll post it next time. Modal? Agree. Yeah, this is not React, of course. Okay, cool. Well, we'll table this for right now, and I'll come back to it. So what could I do? Like, I want to at least keep the test passing before we move on. This is really interesting. Like, I mean, it's such a common use case for modals. I mean, it makes sense that it's not obvious how to do this in React. Let me give it another minute or two. Let me see. Modal bottom sheet. Fix footer. Interesting. No trigger. The buttons to show in the footer. So, I mean, we could have a save button in the footer if we could get that to trigger something. Nah. Options. This is bugging me. I'm sure this does not make for the most exciting of screencasts here. All right. Well, maybe we need to table this for now. So I think we need to table this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stash these changes. If you haven't used stash before, we can just say git stash. I'm going to do help to name it because I want to name this. I think the command is git stash. Yeah, that's the git stash save modal. All right, so now our test should be passing again because I want to get to that because I want to be confident in the changes we're making. So now to wrap up our time together, let's just do a little bit of refactoring of the UI code. Now that we have it looking a bit better, and let's make sure our unit tests are working. They are. Let's see what else we can clean up. So we have our app with a wrapping div and then a row with these things and then the restaurant list page. We might not need, I guess we don't really need the div for right now, so let's remove that just for a little bit of cleanness. I'll try to, after each component I mess with, I will go through and rerun the Cypress test. So now, new restaurant list page. We've got the state, we've got that custom showing form because I couldn't get the modal working just yet. Getting out the state. So having this conditional here, like, I don't love that. Like, that's not my favorite. So how can we do this? Well, one way we can extract this is to have this be another function, another method on the component here. So let's do that. So let's call it render new restaurant form. And let's see if we can extract this whole thing here. Could be we'll leave the row there, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Do this to render new restaurant form to actually call it. And then in here, we're going to say, so now that we're not inside like a sequence of JSX, we can say if show new restaurant form, return new restaurant form. And maybe we don't need to return anything. Maybe we could, oh, this is going to be state. We'll just do here this.state.show new restaurant form. And so now that that's there, now we may not need to return anything. So let's see if that's the case. Let's remove show new restaurant form from there. Extract the restaurant names there. And so now this looks a lot simpler. Like this kind of usage of kind of JavaScript right in the middle of my JSX, that's a lot cleaner, and I like that a lot better. So let's try that. Cool, that's nice. So that's a good refactoring. And I'm satisfied with this for now. Like again, we're gonna probably replace these two with the modal component once I can get that working. Ooh. FindToFirst says, yeah, Materialize CSS, modals HTML, class modal close. Cool, thanks. Yes, so that is a good way to get the modal to close, and that makes sense. what I want to do, and I didn't explain that well, so sorry about that. What I want to do is be able to programmatically close it inside my handle save method. So, and in fact, what I really want to do is take onSave is going to, is it going to return a promise? I guess it's not necessarily going to return a promise because we're not going yet. But I want to be able to programmatically close the modal there, and I'm not totally sure how to do that. And I don't think yet, like putting a class on an element, like it's not, I want to trigger it from within JavaScript itself. So yeah, so Findtuffer or others, if you can think of a way of something I can put here in the handle save to close out the modal, or really it wouldn't be here because this is ignorant of that, but back out at the restaurant list page in the handle add restaurant when we're setting the state, some code I can put there to get the modal to close, definitely let me know. And I think maybe I'll try it offline at that point. So any suggestions are definitely welcome and appreciated. All right, so we have our restaurant list page, and I like the look and feel now with this extracted function. That kind of wraps that conditional up there so the conditional isn't cluttering up our function here, so that's nice. Now let's look at the restaurant list. That's actually, well, no, this actually has some this has some conditionality to it too, so I'd also like to extract that. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of create separate functions because this is a functional component. I'm going to say empty restaurant items. So we return empty restaurant items. So when it's empty, we're going to return this. And then we could just say restaurant items. Let's pass it. Maybe without. Maybe let's do the name parameter to keep it parallel, or the options object, I should say. Now we'll put parens here, and now we can avoid those parens actually. So we're returning the map. We're mapping through and returning all of those. All right, so now we can say if length is 0, return. Wait. This is my React newness since I use Vue most of the time. Can I do empty restaurant items? I guess I can. I guess we'll find out, but that is definitely going to look the nicest to me. So that's one we could extract it out. So let's rerun this and make sure it's still working. Cannot read property map of undefined. Okay, so I've gotten something wrong. Restaurant names. Oh, right, I haven't passed that in. Restaurant names equals restaurant names. So we pass that through, and let's retry. Cool, so that passes. But so I still, like personally for me, I don't love having any conditionals intermixed with actual JSX. So if I can avoid that, that would be better. So this is a sort of a silly name, but just in passing, I'm going to call this some restaurant items. And maybe we'll change this to say no restaurant items. And what we're going to do, we're going to call this function restaurant items. Pass through the restaurant names again. And this is one of the nice things about React is having these small functional components even inline. I mean, this is why folks are excited about hooks and the ability to use functional components for more things because they compose so well. So I'm just going to take this block out here. Again, I keep putting curlies, but the point of these functions, at least the way I'm writing them here, is that I don't want curlies. I just want it to be returned here. So I want to say, in this case, I could do that, but I really like, oh no, that's right, no. If I'm using parens like this, I need to use the question. I need to use the ternary operator. So that's fine. So here we're going to do, restaurant items. So check this out. So our restaurant list opens a collection and then it outputs the restaurant items. So the restaurant items has a conditional around the whole thing and outputs one of two components depending on which one we choose. Then in those components, that's where we put the mapping in this case and just the direct component output in this case. So let's rerun with Cypress to see if this works. And it works, that's great. So the other thing is, the way I like to write components, I actually like to have kind of step down. I think Uncle Bob Martin calls it the step down rule. But it's the idea of like the highest level primary component is at the top. So the restaurant list is there, and then next is restaurant items. So how do I know how to do that? So we can move that next. And then for restaurant items, we need no restaurant and some restaurant, so those are there. So there's a linter rule called no use before define that would error out in this case. Let me actually pull that up to see it. I think it's called no use before define error. Let's see if that works. Oh, I might have gotten it wrong. Let's see here. ESLint, no use before define. Oh, does it have hyphens? Yeah. No? Yes, it did. No use before define error. Huh, well, regardless. Let's take that back out. But the point is, in my ESLint rule set, I turn that off because I like to be able to do this. I find this to be a plus. So when we open the restaurant list file, the first thing we see is the restaurant list, and we can step down as we need to see other function components in the file. But to the rest of the app, we just export the restaurant list. So this is great that our tests, excuse me, our tests still pass. Now this is nice and clean. This is as well. I haven't looked through the restaurant form. So let's see real quick if there's any refactors we want to do in there. We've got some stateful component stuff happening here. There's no need to be pedantic about the line breaks. I think small, medium, and large would be nice to have on one line. Those go together in my mind, so I think I would like that a bit better. Yeah, okay, cool. On change, handle text change, that's still all the same, and we're good to go. Let's run the Cypress test to make sure we're good. Fine Topher, hey, thank you so much for offering to play around with the modal. That's really great. Yes, I do. I love to push up pull requests, actually, after each episode so folks can check them out. I'm not sure anyone's taken me up on it before, so I would love to do that for you. And you may get to play with the modals before I do. So thanks for your help. Like, it'll be fun to try out. And of course, you can also give Cypress a try if you haven't done it before, running it locally to make sure it still passes. So cool. Yeah, thanks for the offer. That's awesome. Participation. This is really cool. Yeah, love to see what kind of expertise you have to share. All right, great. So we've kind of refactored our components to look a little nicer. So let's kind of review these. Remove the unnecessary div. Put those on one line. Yeah, we extracted. Yeah, check this out. So the old form of this component had, is it nested? Oh, there's a map nested inside a ternary, so I do not love that. So having those as separate components is really nice. And there might be user interface performance implications of this, so that's something just to check out. But for the sake of code readability, I really like this. Cool. So then in this component, we are pulling out the render of this conditional separately, so that works out nice. That makes that feel a little better. Clean up JSX code. And honestly, this is one of the things I was, like many people, was opposed to JSX at first, but seeing this approach where the things are broken up into small components, that really cleans things up. So I think we're good to go. I will push up this branch as a PR as Fine Topher requested in just a little while, so you can check it out. I'll post it. I'll leave the chat open so I can post in there. You can also see it on I guess on my Twitter channel would be a great place to see it as well. And you saw the link down below of the repo, so you could watch the repo or just check it out there in a little while. So next time what we're going to do is we're going to go through and check out the functionality of our feature again. We're going to see what edge cases are remaining, and we're going to drive out fixing those and cleaning those up. We'll also get I think the modal is significant enough that we'll probably actually get that working on the stream next time itself. So I hope this was useful and helpful. You can see some of the things that are a little bit of work you need to do when you're switching to a new component library, but also the value that the test provides you in being able to cover it. I love test-driven development, as you know well, and I love this test coverage and the agile way it allows us to work. So thanks for joining along with me with this experiment. I'll be back next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern doing some more React test-driven development. See you then. Now let's go to the slides. See ya.